Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we are going to be talking about the 22nd year of Dungeons & Dragons history, 1995, and we're going to talk about 1995 through the filter of clear: catalyst, location, entity, artifact, and relationship. All right, so who was the catalyst for Dungeons & Dragons in 1995? Well, the catalyst for Dungeons & Dragons in 1995 is a gentleman by the name of Neal Stephenson. He's an American fiction author, and he will write Diamond Age. Now, Diamond Age is the story of a young girl who has a very powerful book that enables her to do certain things. Neal Stephenson is an incredibly important gentleman in the history of American fiction. He's still writing fiction today. He will write Snow Crash. He will write Cryptonomicon. He will write Anathem. And the reality is he shifts American fiction into dense, powerful prose, much more so than it really has been, right? So Neal Stephenson, absolute genius, and he continues in the actually one of the things is Dungeons & Dragons is absolutely massively impacted by Tolkien. To this very day, you really can think about Dungeons & Dragons as systematized Tolkien. It's as though Dungeons & Dragons was marinated in Tolkien. It's just throughout the entire product, and its effects are seen there constantly. Now, one of the reasons why is Tolkien is one of the best fiction writers that's ever lived, and he is absolutely an epic level fiction writer from England, right? But America is struggling to put up its own wins in the fiction world, and Neal Stephenson becomes both critically acclaimed and commercially successful, and also Neal Stephenson is kind of reminding every Dungeons & Dragons player who are readers. Dungeons & Dragons players are self-selected as readers, right? Even to be a player, the first thing that happens is you're either told to go buy a $50, 250-page book, which tons of D&D players tons of people who are, invited to the game would say, go spend $50 on a $250 book. They're going to say, buy, right? So, so self-selecting D&D players are readers. It's just a matter of degree, right? And Neal Stephenson is a strong reminder to Dungeons & Dragons players that some of the best fiction prose and fiction novels in the world are still coming out of America, right? And he will help to craft the reading habits of Dungeons & Dragons players by the millions, by the low millions. Whenever we're talking about Dungeons & Dragons, we're talking about low millions. There was a brief period where I think the player base went into double-digit millions. But today, it's high millions, but not double-digit millions, okay? All right. Now, what is our location for 1995? Our location for 1995 is Essen, Germany. And in Essen, Germany, we have a gentleman by the name of Klaus Tuber. And he is showing them a little game that he came up with called Settlers of Catan. Settlers of Catan will solidify the idea of a Euro tabletop role, of a Euro board game. And we'll actually, cleave a line in the sand of this is a Euro game, this is an American board game. Euros will systematically keep randomness out of the game as much as possible. They generally avoid dice, right? And actually, Settlers does have a die, and it's one of the things people hate most about the game. But it is a classic Euro. Settlers of Catan is a classic Euro. It's worker placement. It's not war-based. All these things that are classic Euro board games. And Settlers of Catan will be one of the first games. Would be one of the games that serves as, just nitro for the entire board game industry, right? All right. So who is our entity in 1995? Our entity in 1995 is a gentleman by the name of Richard Garfield, and he is a game designer. And what is the game he has recently designed? So at this point, his game is 2 years old, and that game is Magic the Gathering. Magic the Gathering is created by Richard Garfield, and then in FLGSs, in friendly local game shops, Dungeons and Dragons players are coming in on a Wednesday night, right? And they're setting up shop, and DM Sally is saying, "Hey, Karen, roll your dice to kill that goblin," and in the table, literally 5 feet away from them, Joe and David are, Joe's laying down a Yanawar elf, and David's saying, "I lightning bolt your Yanawar elf," and the Dungeons and Dragons players are looking sideways and going, "Wait, what's this?" And they're seeing card games left and right in their FLGS, and the card games are starting to be played almost, if not as frequently as Dungeons and Dragons. And so people are going to the FLGS store owner and saying, "What's this game?" And so at this point, Magic the Gathering is starting to spread like a virus. And Magic the Gathering, unlike Settlers of Catan, will not just impact the board gaming industry. Magic the Gathering will become historically known as one of the most successful products ever, right? Its player-based engagement is incredible. Almost nothing like it has ever been seen in the history of tabletop games. Not tabletop role-playing games, not board games, tabletop games overall. And actually, Magic the Gathering is so strong, it will compete among globally famous national products. Magic the Gathering is not really a successful tabletop game. It is a massively successful international product with no other signifiers. And this is the very beginning, okay? Magic the Gathering will quickly grow to the point where there will not be a single FLGS that is not stocking Magic the Gathering. There will be, and I'm not kidding, the entire FLGS population in America will grow by like 25-50% overall. People are setting up shops because they're seeing the outrageous success of this game that has dwarfed the success of every other tabletop game, period, that's ever been created. And the reason why Magic the Gathering will do so well is because Magic the Gathering drives its sales through collectability, right? When you buy a pack of Magic, you don't know what you're getting. The entire purchase is shrouded, literally shrouded in mystery, and it will drive sales like crazy. And also the competitive nature of the game will also help. So Richard Garfield will have an absolute raging success on his hands with Magic Gathering, and this will absolutely shape the Dungeons and Dragons world, right? Because it's literally going to start squeezing them out for space, and there will be times where Dungeons and Dragons players, where Sally and Alice, they have their Dungeons and Dragons game there, and then of course another set of Dungeons and Dragons players come in to take another table at the FLGS, and all the tables are filled with Magic the Gathering players. It really, this would happen in most states in the U.S. Like the growth is tremendous. All right, what is our artifact for 1995? Our artifact is a comic book. It is Batman Judge Dredd #1, and this will be a comic book created by Alan Grant. Now, the reason why we're talking about it right now is this is Batman Judge Dredd. So we haven't talked a lot about it, but American comic books are doing very well. They're selling well. They're in the 90s. The comic book industry was going through like kind of a dark phase, getting gritty and adult, and Alan Grant will bring out this comic book, which is Batman and Judge Dredd. Now, what's important about this is one of the things that's happening in 1995 is DC has a strong comic base. They're doing great, right? But one of the things they do now is they're saying, let's add cooperation with other companies. So Judge Dredd is not owned by by DC. It's a completely different company's product. And so this is an intercompany crossover, right? And there will be many of these, and there will also be Marvel DC crossovers. So this artifact, this Batman Judge Dredd comic book, will actually very much embrace the idea that companies will work together, and also the idea of experimentation that's happening in overall in comic books in 1995. What is the relationship for Dungeons and Dragons in 1995? Well, the relationship for Dungeons and Dragons in 1995 is the relationship with nobility. All right. Now we talk about a relationship with nobility. So one of the settings that Dungeons and Dragons will bring out is birthright, and birthright will say, what if your player character was a king? What if they had noble blood? Right. Now this becomes very strange because in Dungeons and Dragons, kingdoms are the norm. Right. They're really, nations are almost unheard of in Dungeons and Dragons settings, but kingdoms are very common, and there are different kings, and there are literally, there's well over a dozen settings that are bouncing around for Dungeons and Dragons at this point. And and if you're paying attention to Dungeon Masters, there are literally hundreds, if not well over 1,000 different settings, homebrew settings, and almost all of them have kingdoms, or if the king has died, the realm is being ruled by a queen. Right? And so you have this idea of nobility, noble blood, monarchies, people ruling by the nobility of their blood, right? And so one of the things that's interesting is Dungeons and Dragons players are saying, well, this realm has a king and this realm has a queen, right? But even as they're playing, right, there are some people, like for instance in England, people are playing with a queen as the leader of their realm in their fantasy world. But then, literally, the next day when they're walking to school, they may pass Buckingham Palace, where the literal queen is there in England, right? And at this point in 2019, now in 1995, the number is even higher than today. But today, there are over 20 countries in the world, IRL, in real life, that have actual kings and queens and have a ruling class that is determined by noble blood, which is like, you're like, what? And so it's really shocking to see that there are still monarchies today and that they actually still retain power, right? So it's pretty shocking to see that this actually exists in IRL, but at the same time, in Dungeons and Dragons, this idea of rulership by noble blood, rulership by blood, by heritage, right, by lineage, is part of the game, and it affects politics of the game, right, very much so that there are courtiers, right, and court politics are a thing within the games, right, and so and also that does point Dungeons and Dragons to actual monarchies, and they have a different relationship with people who really often forget that it is really odd to see that in this world there are actually countries that are ruled by kings and queens, even today in 2019, and certainly in 1995. In fact, in 1995, the British monarchy will really have an incredible amount of goodwill, and will be going through some pretty amazing events, overall for the actual nation itself. Now, that is a clear history of the 22nd year of Dungeons and Dragons, which is I would love to hear your thoughts on I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on Dungeons & Dragons in 1995, what was happening at your table. Please consider liking and subscribing, and thank you very much. Take care.